Story 1. Years ago, my friend's live-in boyfriend died in a freak accident. She went through his email to inform people and discovered affairs. He was in a literal sex club. He had even sent videos of him and my friend having sex to these people, including responding to requests for certain positions. He worked from home and was diligent about cleaning the house before she came home from work. To say this discovery complicated the grieving process would be an understatement. Story 2. I used to work at a daycare, and the same man was the boyfriend of two of the mothers. He would come in with Rhonda in the morning to drop off their baby, and then he would come by in the afternoon with Susan to pick up her child. They eventually found out. Wild behavior. Story 3. A mother from a girl in my child's class cheated with the father of another girl. 6 months later, they both got a divorce and started dating. A few months after that, the other parents who were cheated on also started dating. The girls are now double-step siblings. Story 4. At a family gathering, my aunt got drunk and accidentally revealed that her youngest son is not my uncle's child. He is actually my father's best friend's son. Story 5. My boss and a coworker were fooling around. He was married. She was single. One day, they went to lunch together. About 40 minutes later, the woman called the office in a panic. My boss had a heart attack and died in the middle of their afternoon meeting. Needless to say, the funeral service was very awkward. Story 6. This is like 40-year-old work gossip from my mom, who worked at Disneyland as a ride hostess from the 1970s to the 1990s. For context, when you are a costumed cast member, you check your costume out of the costume shop. It can be a struggle to consistently find pieces that actually fit. So now most people keep their costumes and just wash them at home. Anyway, a cast member of Star Tours caused a crab outbreak because she wore one of the jumpsuits without underwear. Story 7. At my previous job, two coworkers were having a secret affair while both were married to other people. They got caught because they both called in sick on the same day and posted beach photos from the exact same location on social media. To this day, neither returned to the office, and their desks were cleared out by human resources without a word. Story 8. My mother was an addictions counselor. She had inappropriate relationships with clients, provided them alcohol, and brought one to live with us. I was a child at the time and had no idea what was happening or that I could report it. I feel badly for those people. They were manipulated horribly. Story 9. I worked in a grocery store. One of the cashiers and a vendor had a sexual encounter in a storage area. A couple of weeks later, the vendor came in and angrily accused the cashier of giving him a sexually transmitted infection. Story 10. In high school, my married art teacher was having an affair with a student who was a cheerleader. She used to sneak into bars where his band was playing to see him. His wife found out and they got a divorce. He married the student, and they are still together with 2 children. Now she is in his band, which played at our high school reunion. Story 11. I started work at this telecommunications company back in the early 1990s. One of our coworkers was diagnosed with 2 different types of cancer. He had a lot of time off and claimed to be going to the Mayo Clinic. Coworkers started donating vacation hours and illness hours and held fundraisers for his treatment, even though our healthcare insurance was very good. Something did not feel right to me. I was harassed a bit about not donating, but I made excuses. Things were tight, I was newly married, and so on. Plus, he claimed to have 2 cancers that, if I remember correctly, would be highly unusual to have together. This was not a metastatic case. Anyway, as I am sure you guessed, he used up all the donated hours and disappeared with the money. Trust your gut, people. Story 12. In college, one of my friends was extremely intoxicated and defecated in my trash can, then wiped with one of my socks. I never told anyone except my boyfriend, who is now my husband. Story 13. When I was in the 3rd or 4th grade, a classmate named Carla came to my house to play. The next day at school, Carla told others that I had wet my pants. I denied it for 34 years. I did, in fact, wet my pants that day. It was a great play date. I was very excited and had drank a lot of soda. Carla, why did you share my personal story? Story 14. When I was in middle school, Our married school secretary was having an affair with a married police officer whose wife was pregnant. He died in a work-related car accident. The affair was discovered, the wife went into early labor, and the baby died. Story 15. At my previous job, there was an employee in his 60s who made inappropriate sexual comments to staff. Administration did not take the complaints seriously because they thought he was an old man and would not do anything. He is currently in prison for multiple sex offense crimes. The administration was shocked when they found out. Inappropriate comments should always be taken seriously and investigated. Story 16. My cousin Brad and his wife Eliza split up. I assume he cheated on her because of past cheating on girlfriends. He stays with his mom for a bit. My mom and I regularly take my kids to swim in her pool when she is at work. One day, we arrive and see a woman on the porch and a vehicle we don't know. She seems vaguely familiar, but I can't place her. She acts strangely when my mom tries to talk to her and explain why we are there and why she is there. She leaves quickly, and we find my cousin inside acting a bit weird. The next day, I take my youngest to playgroup at the elementary school. During the summer, it's drop-in, so it's easy to see families you don't know. The leader introduces me to a woman, and I try to talk to her, but she is incredibly cold to me. After I leave, it clicks. She is the woman who was at my aunt's house. I am certain she is the affair partner. I look through my cousin and his wife's Facebook, and I finally find her. She is the wife's cousin. So my cousin is cheating with his wife's cousin. On top of it all, she is my neighbor's daughter-in-law. Story 17. The hot tea in my world this week. My 16-year-old has been secretly charging my 12-year-old's headphones each morning and returning them before the younger wakes up. The 12-year-old thinks his new headphones have an amazing battery life. The 16-year-old desperately wants our cats to snuggle in his favorite chair with him, but they prefer almost anywhere but that chair. So I have been secretly spritzing it with a bit of catnip. And now the 16-year-old is ecstatic that they are choosing him. Story 18. I used to have a married supervisor who started a relationship with our other newly married supervisor. He had a recreational vehicle he used for hunting, and they would go out there together. I only found out because we had a work party at a bar, and I overheard the newly married coworkers' friends talking about it. The age gap was significant. The supervisor was in his 60s, and the newly married supervisor was in her 20s. Story 19. A partner was up for tenure, and a professor on the tenure committee was very difficult. He would find every reason to deny the application, but the partner still received tenure. This happened years ago, and that professor eventually left for a better position. A few years ago, he became president of a college far away. Recently, it was announced that the college is closing due to significant financial problems, and he is being sued for sexual harassment by multiple individuals. Story 20. The owner of my town's ice cream shop, a man in his early 40s, solicited one of his employees, a 17-year-old girl, for naked pictures and offered to give her $500 if she pulled her pants down in front of the cameras at the shop and touched herself. She took screenshots of his texts asking for this and showed them to her parents. They confronted the owner. The owner's wife defended him, claiming he was with her at the time of the texts and that he was just drunk. I don't know what happened after this, but I assume nothing serious since the man still owns his ice cream shop, and no one seems to know more about it. I do not personally know anyone involved. I heard about it from a mutual friend of the girl's father. There is nothing I can do about it except inform my other friends. The girl no longer works there. The wife is definitely a horrible person as well. I have heard that she has defended him for other issues, including cheating. I also know that one of the people he cheated on her with was a teacher who got in trouble about 10 years ago for having sex with one of her students. Story 21. A woman once tried to hurt me by sleeping with my boyfriend. We were all at a weekend-long event where I was not constantly spending time with my partner, and she did not really know either of us. She chose the wrong man and ended up pregnant. She trapped the wrong man out of jealousy for someone she had never even spoken with. Story 22. My rich sister-in-law, who is a stay-at-home mom, was arrested for stealing at Target. No one in the family knows, and she does not know that I know because they buried it quickly. The best part is that my mother-in-law was her accomplice, and they had apparently been doing this for months. Story 23. I was a dental assistant and had to train at one office. The main doctor was the most off-putting person. It was very hard to read her most days. One day, she started telling us about the oral surgeon who was literally a parking lot away from our building. It turns out her oldest son was his. The oral surgeon is happily married, with his own children. Her son has no idea that his real father is next door. That's not even the craziest part. When her son was 2, he accidentally slammed the toilet seat on his private area. Out of panic, she rushed him over to his real father, who stitched him up. So really wild story. Story 24. A girl from my hometown had a fake wedding. She was supposed to have a backyard wedding, but the guest list grew too large and it was not going to work. A local reception venue had just opened and needed a test event for marketing, so they offered to host the wedding essentially for free. The bride was difficult. The night before, she called the venue and demanded they change the bolted-down banquet-style long tables to round tables so their seating chart would work. On the day of the wedding, 12 extra people showed up with no explanation. The mother of the bride was berating staff, the whole family had a poor attitude, and the bride shut herself in the bridal suite. The officiant asked her to sign the marriage license, and she refused. She was doubting the relationship and was not sure she wanted to be married. They went through with the entire ceremony and reception anyway, accepted all the gifts and never signed the license. The groom got very drunk. They decided to use the honeymoon, which people had generously contributed to decide if they wanted to be married. To this day, it is unclear if they are legally married. Unfortunately, marriage records are only available for viewing in the actual county clerk's office and not online. So it remains unconfirmed if they are officially married. Common law marriages do not exist in my state, so they would need the license. Story 25. I have one. My elderly dad went to an all-boys school. His classmates stayed in touch all those years and formed a literal old boys network. One day, he received a call in the middle of the night from the wife of one of his classmates, with an unusual request. The poor woman was in tears. Her husband had just died. In fact, he had just died during sex. Only it was not sex with her, it was sex with his mistress. The mistress had called the wife in a panic, as soon as she could move the old man's body off her. The wife knew all about the affair. In fact, she had her own lover, and husband and wife were quite best friends and open about it. They knew each other's lovers. However, they did not want scandal. If the man's death in his mistress's bed became public, the newspapers would be all over it, as he was well known. So the wife's request was, could my dad and his other school friends please arrange it so that her husband died in her bed? So these old men, all in their early 70s at the time, moved the body of their friend at night across town, which they did successfully and uneventfully. It never came out. The man officially passed away peacefully in the family bedroom. Story 26. My neighbor, who had some cognitive challenges, married his cousin. They had 2 children with intellectual disabilities and 1 daughter who seemed fine. She was advised not to have children due to genetic concerns, but she had 3 more children, all with severe intellectual disabilities. The situation is unfortunate. The neighbor comes from a wealthy family involved in politics with long-standing wealth. They made him change his last name but continued sending him money to keep him at a distance. He is in his late 60s, and his mental condition is worsening. On one occasion, he attended a high-profile family event but was asked to leave. They drove him home in an extremely expensive car. Story 27. I am a team lead, and one of my team members was just promoted to lead as well. She was supposed to move to another team. However, our current team has a subspecialty in which she has strong competency. I asked our supervisor if I could move to the other team and have her take my place on our specialized team. I was sworn to secrecy, but the announcement will be made around the 14th officially. I am very proud of her. She has been here less than half as long as I have, but she absorbs policy quickly and does excellent work. Our team will be in the best hands with her. Story 28. One of my closest friends discovered in her 40s that she has another uncle. It is already a huge Mormon family on both sides. Apparently, her grandmother had a baby when she was 16 and gave the child up for adoption. The grandmother kept the secret until her death. They only found out about this man and his large branch of the family because of a genetic ancestry test service. This man is elderly and has found over 20 half-siblings from his father's side so far, including some neighborhood children he grew up with. Many of the half-siblings are open about being children conceived through sexual assault. According to my friend's father, this has been quite common among members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints from the Boomer generation. They are very interested in genealogy, and they are discovering the family secrets their parents tried to hide. Story 29. I'm from a very religious family. My grandfather was a pastor, and he and my grandmother had many children. They all grew up in church, sang in the choir, and taught Sunday school. My aunt has had a habit of being involved with married men since her early 20s, which has ruined several friendships and marriages. Another aunt is a recovering alcoholic. One of the other children was involved in tax evasion. I'm the only grandchild who knows this. Everyone believes that all of my grandparents' children are good, religious people, but they are not. Story 30. A guy I know, more an acquaintance at this point because of this story, started dating a woman several years older about 10 years ago and ultimately married her. Friends and I never really understood the relationship as neither seemed particularly happy. Shortly after marriage, he started describing a 7-figure settlement she was owed due to an accident, but kept saying the lawyers were messing up, and it still had not been paid. Suddenly, she developed issues with motor function. After seeing multiple doctors, it was finally determined she had an aggressive form of amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. He was initially distraught and attentive, a truly devoted husband taking care of his dying wife. It was honestly beautiful and beyond what I or my friends expected from him. One day he called me to say he had met up with a former girlfriend from over a decade ago and they slept together. He was deeply remorseful and said he would not do it again. While I do not believe cheating is ever acceptable, I empathized with him. I cannot imagine being in his position and tried to see his infidelity through a slightly more understanding lens. A couple of days later, he called to say they were getting a hotel room together for a long weekend. From then on, he stopped seeing his dying wife entirely. She still had some limited mobility and posted several times to their shared social media page, expressing deep sadness that in her final time of need her husband had deserted her. It was absolutely disgusting. I tried to distance myself from him at this point, but when he reached out, I told him how wrong this all was. He was entirely unreceptive and did not seem to care. Here is where it gets worse. One day he called me and said he was down the block from where I work, quite far from where they live. The woman he was cheating on his dying wife with was in the hospital. Her previously in remission cancer had returned. Initially, the prognosis seemed okay, but he may have been sugarcoating it. After a couple more weeks of completely ignoring his wife in favor of his new girlfriend, her prognosis became dire. She passed away after about a week. His wife, as far as I know, is still alive at the time of this writing. It has been about 2 years now, and to the best of my knowledge, he has not seen her in a year. My mother, who has experience as a caretaker for someone with amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, asked me to inquire where she was so she could visit and read to her. When I asked, he told me, she does not want visitors. No matter how much I tried to get information, he would not divulge. About 2 weeks after his mistress died, he had a new girlfriend. She is also much older. They just took a trip together. I do not know what happened with the settlement, but he told me he was pretty much broke and needed power of attorney to access his wife's bank account and see what was in it. Pathological does not begin to describe it. Summary: a husband cheats on his wife, who has an extremely aggressive form of amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, with another woman who died of cancer after about a month. He now has a new girlfriend. His wife, after a couple of years, is still alive to my knowledge. Story 31. I met my former coworker on a dating app 3 weeks before he proposed to his now wife. Fortunately, it was before we started working together, and we never went beyond one date. Story 32. This girl I went to high school with was really mean, always nasty to people for no reason. She had been dating a boy I had a crush on for years. In college, they broke up and no one knew why. A year or so later, he told me that she had cheated on him at her brother's wedding with her first cousin. Story 33, millionaire, darling of a third world country, think rags to riches story. But he earned his money by building a startup that actually helps the people of his country. He quietly married a woman in secret. This woman is just after his money. That's not the juicy gossip, though. It's common in this country for people to marry for financial security. The secret that I am fairly certain he and his family do not know is that he is her fourth husband in 10 years. 2 of her marriages were to men in different countries abroad. We are fairly certain one of those marriages overlapped before she got a divorce. She is my old roommate. Another girl who shared an apartment with her, and I have a running joke about it at this point. We wanted nothing to do with her after finding out she scammed us. But she kept appearing in the strangest places in our lives over the past 12 years. Pretending to be a technology entrepreneur, then a yoga instructor with more years of experience than she has been alive, then a fashion blogger, and then an eco-fashion blogger. She claims to have created 3 applications which cannot be found anywhere. She also claims to be an expert in Web 3.0 and the metaverse. Anyway, she keeps appearing in the oddest places, and it became a running joke between us. She finally got the millionaire she always wanted, and at first I thought I would be bitter about her getting away with all her lies. But lately, I just feel sad for her. She burned bridges in every city, country, and industry she has been in. She got exactly what she wanted, and I wonder how lonely she must be. Story 34. One of my former teachers has, by all appearances, a wonderful and healthy marriage with another teacher. They are seen as the power couple in town, with a romantic love story that the wife shares every year with her students. However, her husband had an affair with another man. They made plans to leave their spouses for each other, but only one of them followed through and left his wife. The other, my former teacher, did not and ended up confessing the truth to his wife. Story 35. My friends' neighbors are interesting. They mean well but have no other friends and tend to overshare and be clingy. The wife thought she had a month-long urinary tract infection or yeast infection. She overshares a lot, and finally went to the doctor. Turned out she has gonorrhea. She talked to her husband, and he said, "Oh, you didn't get it from me." That was the end of it. Even though she's seen new and different dating apps on his phone, including Grindr. They don't sleep in the same bed anymore. He's obsessed with fishing, and she usually goes along. He always invites everyone to join him, but the last few weekends she hasn't gone, and he adamantly refuses to take anyone else because nothing's really been biting and you'll be bored. This man has invited me fishing thousands of times even though I always say no, and now he doesn't want company? Story 36. Henry, the black swan who lives in the pond in my neighborhood, has been seen stepping out on his long-term partner, Kylie. She does not know, though. A new swan moved in on the other side of the bridge, and Henry has been visiting him secretly, then coming home to Kylie in the evening. Story 37. Ted Cruz was very unpopular during his time in the Bush administration. The youngest children of government staffers would deliberately eat foods that caused the most gas, then get into elevators with him and release it. Story 38. An older friend in a local brewery group was talking about her new romantic interest and mentioned a suggestive message she had sent, something she had never done before. She was very excited. A month later, I heard from another friend how she caught her husband cheating because of a suggestive message he received. Yes, the same woman. I did not say a word. Story 39. We currently have a person at our workplace who keeps placing banana peels on everyone's car door. They have been trying to find out who it is for months. Started with just a few cars, but now it has escalated to almost every car door in the parking lot. Everyone is upset to the point that human resources and all of the top managers are now involved. It is surprising that it has been going on this long, and they still have no idea who it is. But I know who it is because it is me. Story 40. I went on a trip to Vietnam with my married friend and my girlfriend, who is now my wife. He was sick one day, so we left him in the hotel room. Later, he told us he got a massage and, while trying to leave, was extorted for a couple $100s. I know he had a sexual encounter with the masseuse and tried to leave without paying the tip. Story 41. Teacher here. I have many stories, but here are a couple of the more serious ones. A married teacher was sleeping with the married principal in his office after hours. A married secretary, who was married to the band director, was sleeping with a student. When the story came out, they both somehow kept their jobs. They got divorced, and later the student started working for the district after graduating. The tennis coach resigned because he refused to take a drug test. He was told 1 week in advance about the test, but he likely could not stay off drugs long enough to clean his system. A teacher was sleeping with a student. When administration found out, they told him he could either resign or be fired. He resigned and went to teach in a different district. I left the school around that time because I could not work for a place that would cover up child abuse. Story 42. My spouse had a long-time very religious friend who broke up with his wife, saying that she would not be a good mother. It turned out that not only was he wrong for saying that to his high school sweetheart, he was also cheating on her with his brother's wife. His brother got divorced, he married his brother's wife, and they have another baby. Her other 2 children, who are the brothers, have half-sibling cousins and a stepfather uncle. The new wife did not have to change her last name, so good for her. I'm just glad the first wife, who we are also friends with, did not have children with him. Story 43. There is a potentially significant scandal brewing within the Swedish stand-up scene. A comedy podcast basically outed a very successful comedian without mentioning his name for legal reasons, but essentially compared him to the Russell Brand situation. The podcast openly discussed the serious sexual misconduct that several female comedians have accused him of and how it is becoming an industry problem to have a sex pest at the forefront of the industry. Story 44. This happened almost 15 years ago, but I tell this story whenever I want to make a point about not gossiping about people you don't know. My then husband, who quickly became my ex-husband after this event, was dealing certain narcotics. We were not living together. The kids and I lived in a different house 20 minutes away. I had no idea, which is why I give the benefit of the doubt when a spouse says they didn't know, because people can be that good at hiding things, especially when you're not always living together. Anyway, he got arrested. I went to work the next day. I worked in food service, and because it was a small town and located in a manufacturing plant, my boss kindly put me in the least traffic spot over the lunch hour. A lady came up to buy a sandwich. She was my coworker's sister-in-law, so I knew who she was. Apparently, though she knew my first name, she didn't know anything about me beyond that. As I was cashing her out, she said, "Did you hear what happened in town yesterday?" I decided to play dumb and hope it was something else. Nope. She told me that this guy, my ex, who ran a specific business, got arrested for dealing. I said, "Oh, really?" She kept going. The police busted down the door and raided his house. His wife and kids were home, and she got arrested for helping him. Their kids are now in foster care. Really? I said. Yes. They're both in the county jail now. Oh, really? Yeah. I doubt they'll get the kids back. I just looked at her, exhausted but very amused by the story she was telling me. I asked again, "Really?" And she was adamant. I took a breath and said, "So that's my husband you're talking about. He and I don't live together, and I don't even live in town. The kids live with me, not him. They are currently at my house with my cousin. I was at work yesterday when all this happened, and now here I am, so I'm not in jail. But one part you're right about is that my husband is in jail until at least Tuesday. I have never seen that look on someone's face before or since. I stayed at that job for another 8 years, and I think it was about the 7th year after that when she could look me in the eye again. The funniest part? The next day, my parents took me, the kids, and my cousin out for dinner at a waterfront restaurant in beautiful weather. The deck tables were all full except one. Guess who was seated next to me and didn't have any other choice? After we left, I had to explain to my mother why I kept trying not to laugh. She thought the stress of the previous 24 hours had made me go literally insane. No, I was just enjoying the fact that this woman, who didn't know me, had told me a wild gossip story about me. Never tell someone you don't know a juicy gossip story if you don't also know the people involved. Story 45. Back in the day, I worked with a bank robber in construction and met a bona fide murderer who specialized in cases involving expensive divorces. This was a long time ago and alleged. It was before cell phones and public surveillance systems. Also, most of my friends have cheated on their wives, which is pretty upsetting. I am a Generation X male for reference. There was a lot of gossip about everything I have shared here, but I kept my mouth shut. Story 46. One of the parents in my classroom transferred from another nearby school. He specifically requested that the mother not be allowed near the school or the child, as he had a court order. Talking to the child's other teacher, I found out the father was having an affair with another mother. The wife discovered this and confronted the other woman at the school, resulting in a big fight. The wife then kicked out the father, who went to live with a new girlfriend. After a few months, he cheated on the new girlfriend with his wife, so the girlfriend kicked him out, and he returned to living with the wife. Of course, we are left to deal with all the emotional trauma the child has experienced. Story 47. I knew someone who dated a very close relative of a very prominent A-list actor. This person looked exactly like the star. It was uncanny. They broke up, and this person became totally unhinged, engaging in stalking and slashing tires. It was shocking and crazy. Apparently, they had a history of this behavior, so it is unclear why it was never exposed to the media. Story 48. I'm sure this will get buried, but family gossip. My grandpa was an only child. He apparently never looked like either of his parents, but no one really thought much about it because his mother had clearly been pregnant with him. However, my grandpa was an absolute narcissistic psychopath and emotional abuser as an adult, so he obviously had some major issues. He died about 10 to 12 years ago. My mom and my aunt went to his apartment to clean up his belongings and found his adoption papers. He had known his whole life and told no one. My mom and her siblings did an ancestry DNA test and found a woman they were related to. She was their aunt. They reached out to her, and she was cryptic at first but slowly revealed enough details for us to put the story together and figure out that his real father had been the Republican politician and vice presidential candidate Henry Cabot Lodge Jr. The story went something like this. Henry Cabot Lodge Jr. was married with several children. He had an affair with a 16-year-old model and impregnated her. To avoid the scandal, he pawned the baby off onto his bodyguard at the time, my great-grandfather by adoption, as he knew he and his wife wanted children but couldn't have them. This poor 16-year-old girl was forced to live with them in hiding for her entire pregnancy, while my great-grandmother stuffed a pillow in her dress and went about town. My grandpa looked exactly like Henry Cabot Lodge Jr. It is absolutely uncanny. My mom looked exactly like my grandpa and two of my siblings, and I took on many of his features. So, I literally have Henry Cabot Lodge Jr.'s dimples. Thankfully, not his political associations. It would be nice to have the money, though. Story 49. Decades-old news, but I knew well before it was announced to the public that they captured Saddam Hussein. Story 50. Not sure if this is spicy, but it's interesting. I went to school in the same class with someone who is now a very famous actor. Household name pretty much anywhere in the world. His biography page, and as far as I have seen everywhere on the internet, says that he is 5 years younger than he really is. No, I'm not giving any clues, but I have no doubt he's far from the only one. Aging can be career-destroying in Hollywood, so good luck to him. Okay, one clue because I don't want to damage his reputation. It's not Hugh Jackman. This is getting out of hand. No one has guessed it, although I'm having a chuckle at how people would respond if they knew. People have obviously stalked my comments and worked out that I'm Australian, but I spent several years of my childhood in another country. Story 51. When I was in middle school, my classmate's mother, who was a teacher, had an affair with our football coach. He left his wife and newborn to be with the teacher, was physically confronted by the husband, and then the teacher and husband reconciled. Story 52. Went to the courthouse to drop off paperwork and ended up chatting with a woman. The man told woman A he couldn't pay child support because he was paying woman B. He told woman B he couldn't pay child support because he was paying woman C. He couldn't pay woman C because he was paying woman A. The three women got together and took him to court for their missing child support. I was so invested in the story that I actually waited, hoping he would arrive, but he did not. When I left, the women were listing all the places he could be found. Story 53. My high school gym teacher had a relationship with an assistant principal on a half-day right after my swimming final with her. Both were married and both were fired. It made the local news that the man's wife left his bags packed on their doorstep. My English teacher eloped with the principal over winter break. However, did we as a class need to know about his cowboy preference? Story 54. My dad's cousins are twins. Let's call them Tim and Tom. In high school, Tim and Tom were dating another set of twins. We will call them Joan and Jane. They dated through high school and ended up having a shared wedding. After both had one child, they got divorced, married each other's exes, and had another child. The four children are half-siblings but genetically full siblings. It makes for great family reunions. Story 55. My mom always told me I lost her wedding ring when I was a toddler, and she made me feel very guilty about it. A few years ago, my aunt explained that I saw my mom bringing her boyfriend over while my dad was at work. When my father came home, I told him that my mom had her boyfriend over. I threw that wedding ring down the house vents for a reason. Story 56. I used to work in a grocery store. There was a girl around 20 years old who worked overnight stocking shelves. She was caught being intimate with at least 5 different overnight employees. Actions took place in the elevator, the freezer truck, and other locations. Somehow, she never got fired. I can only assume she was involved with a manager. Eventually, she became bored with the employees at our store and transferred to another location. Story 57. I worked for a healthcare company that for years has been trying to take over the area where I work. A woman in this healthcare company, a monopoly wannabe, somehow became president and director of operations without much schooling and zero experience. This was a sizable group with ties to one of the biggest insurance payers in the country. There was always the odd joke about how she slept her way to the top. This was a frequent topic of discussion during big manager meetings at the local hotel. Someone searched online and found a book she had written on Amazon. She also mentioned to some members of leadership that she wrote as a hobby outside of work. The story was about a woman who, indeed, slept her way to the top. Names were very similar to those of C-level executives at the healthcare company. Think Luke and Lucas, Peter and Pedro, etc. The book was quite scandalous and explicit. Pretty soon, everyone knew about the book as it got passed around like candy. Too many coincidences between the book and real life convinced people it was hardly fiction. About 7 years ago, she suddenly disappeared from the company. I just checked her LinkedIn, and she is now an interior designer. Story 58. My work friend is pregnant with her second child. She was recently very sick at work and went home early. She found her husband in bed with her brother. Her husband thought he could distract from the situation by telling her that he is also the father of her 2 sisters' children, as if that would make it seem less serious. He was wrong. So yes, this man slept with all 3 siblings and has 4 children with 2 of them. My friend kicked him out, and I believe he is currently living with her brother. Story 59. My cousin is the father of 1 fraternal twin. The kids are now adults. Let's just say his child turned out to be the Danny DeVito to the co-twins Arnold Schwarzenegger. Story 60. A woman in my town, in her early 40s, recently had a baby. The father was 14 when she got pregnant. He is her teenage daughter's ex-boyfriend. The now 15-year-old father had been reported missing before this all came out. He had left his own father, who lived in another state. The woman posted maternity photos with the 15-year-old father. This woman had cut my hair for more than half of my life. She was always a mess, but this was a huge surprise. I was in denial when I heard it, even though I remember her talking about texting her daughter's ex, saying that he was her friend. I clearly knew that was wrong, but she never mentioned it again, and I just ignored my gut telling me this was not okay. After all, the child lived several states away at this point. Months later, she talked about her new younger boyfriend. My heart dropped. I asked, "How young?" She said he was 27. I was like, phew, okay, good. Then it all came out a few months ago. Legal action has still not been taken, but we live in a small town, and many people in the area know at this point. A viral video made it a known issue. I feel so upset for her baby, but even more so for her other two kids and the father. She is a predator and a groomer. I don't know if she realizes how completely wrong this is. I haven't talked to her since before she gave birth and all of this came out, and I likely never will again. Story 61. I am aware of some upcoming organizational changes where I work that I should not be privy to. These changes involve one colleague being demoted and another being fired, and they are to take effect 2 months from now. It is more than a little awkward knowing that someone's life is going to change drastically before they are even aware of it. The situation is intense and almost a bit much for me. Estimated time of arrival. I will not be telling these two because A, nothing is set in stone at this place and plans could change, especially this far out, and B, if human resources has reached these conclusions for these people, there is no doubt they are already on a performance improvement plan and are well aware of the trouble they are in. If they are not already looking for employment elsewhere, then that is on them because everyone here knows a performance improvement plan means human resources has their sights set on you. Story 62. I taught girls who I thought were twins. It turns out they were half-sisters. Their father impregnated their mother and then impregnated his other partner. Both women left him and got together. Now they have their mothers, their father, and his new wife. Story 63. My husband's boss is a horrible person and chief financial officer of the company. When my husband retires this year, I am turning in all the notes my husband has told me about this boss stealing money from the company to the auditors, state authorities, and federal authorities. He has stolen millions in federal and state grants. The Christian-based company is going down in flames. Story 64. I came across a Reddit profile of a coworker. We work in a niche industry, and he commented on a role-related subreddit. While browsing his profile, I accidentally saw an explicit photo that confirmed his identity. I'm not sure what to do with this information other than share it here. Edit, we are both men. Story 65. Mrs. Crabapple and Principal Skinner were in the closet having a private moment, and I saw one of the babies. The baby looked at me. Story 66. When I was in high school in the early 2000s, a girl showed up to a formal dance with an older man. He proposed, and it seemed really scandalous, but I did not think much of it. She and I were social media friends, so I saw that they had a few children, split up, and moved on. He also had an older daughter before their marriage. She married a friend's brother, so I occasionally heard about her. He died somewhat recently. The daughters, the one born a year or two after the prom marriage proposal and the one he had before that, shared a lot on social media about drama with his estate. One day, someone talking about prom proposals made me think about this whole ordeal. It got me reflecting on the proposal and how it was the same man involved in this other drama. I wondered how old he was and realized that since he had died, I could look up his obituary to find out. He was 42 when he proposed to an 18-year-old. It happened at a school dance and no one stopped them. Not her parents, not any of the parent volunteers or teachers. He was probably about the same age as many of them. I had no idea how wrong this was when I originally witnessed it. Story 67. Our middle school choir teacher was caught kissing one of the algebra teachers in a closet. This was especially surprising since everyone had assumed he was gay. Story 68. My friend was married to one of the kindest, best-looking men around. Every time she and I went out with other friends, she would end up making out with random men. It really bothered me because he would be home taking care of the children, working hard to support his expensive shopping habits. After 2 years of her always complaining about how she should divorce him but not having the courage to tell him, I did. I ran into him at the grocery store and told him she was miserable and always making out with strangers. God bless him, he took it well. She called me to thank me for telling him because she was finally getting the divorce she wanted. He ended up with an amazing woman. She married a very wealthy older man who died 2 or 3 years after their marriage. His children hated her since she was clearly a gold digger, and they contested the will and won. She had to get a job for the first time and is now bagging groceries. Story 69. In middle school, I had a math teacher who made math as entertaining as possible and was generally likable. though a bit annoying. He played a random song at the beginning of class to help us shake off brain fog and focus on numbers and other topics. One day, he played Nickelback's "If Today Was Your Last Day." That was the last day he showed up to class. We had substitute teachers for the rest of the year, and students speculated about his absence, ranging from a cold to terminal illness, as faculty provided no explanation. 2 years later, I found out he left because he was caught having an inappropriate relationship with a high school student. Story 70. Someone at my work has been involved with every new manager to receive gradual promotions. I can confirm this through one of her friends who admitted to being unfaithful to her husband multiple times to advance her career. She will now be my manager and believes I am unaware of how she obtained the position. I will keep this information to myself until necessary. Story 71. Circa 1992, I was on a playdate with a new classmate. First, this little girl said to me, "When I heard there was a new kid named Zon, I didn't ask you on a playdate at first because I figured you were Asian and weird." Then she pulled the then anonymously authored book Primary Colors off her parents' bookshelf and said, "People say my daddy wrote this." 4 years later, it hit the news that it was him. Little me had the information. Story 72. My male gay coworker, who is engaged and lives with his parents, cheated with my newly divorced straight female coworker. It was the first woman he had ever been with. Story 73. My university flatmate regularly has loud sex with her boyfriend, but there were multiple women in the room one weekend. The rumor was that the boyfriend was with everyone in the room. They are still together and possibly moving in together, so I guess they all agreed to this if it happened. Story 74. Does this count as gossip? 25 years ago, my serial cheating father had an affair on his wife at the time with our across-the-street neighbor lady. I knew this because I used to play StarCraft in the front room of our home, and I wasn't allowed to use that particular computer because his wife at the time said so. I used to turn the brightness all the way down on the monitor and keep the lights off. I saw a lot of things out of that enormous bay window in the suburbs. I played a lot of StarCraft. Things between his wife at the time got rocky. I didn't really understand because I thought they were both always awful humans, so of course they would fight. But cash rules everything around me, baby. A month or two later, I witnessed his wife at the time visiting the same across-the-street neighbor's home at late hours. Her visits became quite frequent until they stopped entirely. Eventually, across-the-street neighbors divorced. I was a dumb teenager. I never connected the dots. A few months after the across-the-street neighbor divorce, I came home from school and found a for sale sign on the lawn of my home. His wife at the time told me my father had moved across the country for work, and I needed to find a place to live. She had packed up my belongings and put everything in boxes for me. I could spend the night, but the house was sold, and I had to go. She would be moving back to her parents' home in the States. I was 16, and although I was pretty good at StarCraft, those skills did not translate to anything. The across-the-street neighbor lady saw me trying to fit everything I owned into my old vehicle while sobbing uncontrollably the next morning and let me stay with her until I could make proper arrangements. I stayed there about a week before my best friend's family took me in. I assumed the across-the-street neighbor lady had gained weight because of the stress of her divorce. I never asked any questions. She also cried a lot during that week. Nobody ever admitted to anything. Nobody ever acknowledged any wrongdoing. I moved on from having parents. I grew up. Last Christmas, I got a Facebook ad from a random girl who had my last name. She asked me if I knew my father, who turned out to also be her father, one that she had never met. Her mother was the across-the-street neighbor lady. Dots connected. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.